Can the federal government do its job by giving a tax break to people with money in the hope that they will invest and employ more to everyone's benefit? The point of the Democratic Party is to answer this question with a no, and to find an alternative that does not simply ingratiate the moneyed interests in the country. To achieve clarity about this task, it's important to begin by understanding what such an alternative cannot be. In the first place, it cannot be simply a coalition of minorities and of the professional elites that claim to represent them. Not since the time of Franklin Roosevelt has there been in the United States a project responsive to the needs, interests, and aspirations of the broad working class majority of Americans, regardless of race. No program that fails to deal with the realities of mass poverty, mass incarceration, and exclusion of the majority from the advanced sectors of production deserves to be supported by progressives. In the second place, such an alternative cannot be, as Hillary Clinton wants it to be, a set of technocratic initiatives that leave unchallenged and unchanged the arrangements shaping educational and economic opportunity in the United States. It's good to give a tax break to small businesses, but it's much better to create arrangements that allow small businesses to access not only credit, but also advanced technology, advanced practice, and world markets. It's good to support poor children in deprived families and neighborhoods. But it's far more important to develop initiatives that make an analytical education available to everyone, not just to a privileged elite, and that diminish the dependence of public schools on local municipal finance. In the third place, such an alternative cannot be, as Bernie Sanders proposes, simply the use of progressive taxation to fund more social entitlements. Progressive taxation does not make a dent on inequality unless it is massive. And if it is massive, it is not feasible, either politically or economically. Much more important than progressive taxation is the structure of the arrangements that define access to economic and educational opportunity. The system of progressive taxation and social spending has a useful but subsidiary role. And in that system, the progressive profile of taxes matters less than the aggregate tax take and how it is spent. Let us not sacrifice transformative effects to progressive pieties. Let us insist instead on the initiatives that can change the structure of disadvantage and disempowerment in the United States. These three unacceptable alternatives are three ways of evading the task of the Democratic Party. But there is another way. There is a progressive project. And this progressive project has 5 elements. The first element is substantially to raise the tax take in the United States. Politicians don't like to talk about raising taxes. But it is impossible for the government in the United States to invest as it should in people and in their capacities, in the physical infrastructure of the country, and to honor its obligations to the young and the old, the sick and the needy, without increasing the level of public revenues. But it can and should increase the tax take in a way that minimizes disruption to the incentives to save, invest, and employ. That means relying, at least in the short term, on a broad so-called flat tax, especially in the form used in almost every other advanced country in the world, a comprehensive, flat-rate, value-added tax. Everything that is lost in progressivity on the revenue-raising side of the budget can be gained in double on the spending side as a result of the higher level of tax take that such a neutral tax permits with minimum economic cost. Progressives like to insist on the progressive character of taxation. But the truth is that progressive taxation makes much less of a difference to the attenuation of inequality than the overall level of public revenues and how that money is spent by the government. Progressives should want to establish public finance on a stable basis, not to genuflect to the bond markets, but on the contrary, so that the American people do not have to wait on the interests and whims of high finance, so that the government can honor and develop the social contract in the United States. The second element in this progressive project has to do with economic opportunity, and especially with access to the new form of advanced production that is emerging in the United States and in all the major economies of the world. It is a form of production characterized not only by the accumulation of technology and knowledge, but above all by perpetual innovation. And it mixes cooperation and competition in the same activities. It is a knowledge economy, but it does not yet exist in a socially inclusive form. The most important initiatives to democratize economic opportunity in the United States would be those that challenge and change this situation. First, by extending access to credit, to advanced technology, to advanced practice, and to world markets. The federal government would have to work together with the states to this end. Second, by investing in multi-purpose technologies, the most advanced technologies that are applicable to many sectors of production, and to adapt those technologies to the needs and capabilities of small and emergent firms. Third, to establish procedures that enable us to identify which experiments work best, and then to propagate them throughout the economy. and to associate this experimentalism with a new form of technical education available to all Americans in the course of their working lives. And fourth, to make the innovations in contract, property, and corporate law that would allow the country to organize cooperative competition, which the knowledge economy requires. Networks of small and medium-sized firms that can compete against one another and cooperate at the same time, pooling resources and exchanging people, ideas, and practices. There's the basis for a socially inclusive, democratized form of the new knowledge economy. The third element in this progressive project has to do with educational opportunity. And it has two sides. One side goes to the content and character of education, to establish throughout the country, at every level, a form of education that is analytical in its method, that in its scope sacrifices encyclopedic superficiality to selective depth, that in its social setting prefers cooperation, teams of teachers and of students working together, and that in its attitude to receive knowledge is dialectical. That is to say, it presents every area of learning from contrasting points of view. The other side of this educational project has to do with the institutional context of public education. The goal must be to reconcile the local management of the schools with national standards of investment and quality. The quality of the education that a young American receives should not depend on the family into which it was born or the place in which it lives. And that means that school finance can't depend simply on municipal taxes. And it means as well that all levels of the government, federal, state, and municipal, have to work together to develop corrective procedures. If a local school system fails, the three levels of government should have joint bodies that can take over that failing school system, fix it, and return it fixed. The fourth element in this progressive project is the reinvention of American federalism. These economic and educational alternatives require a new style of federalism. Traditionally, we think of the states as laboratories of experimentation, but a rigid federalism that allocates power in watertight compartments to different levels of government is anti-experimentalist in its consequences. We now need a cooperative federalism. Vertical cooperation among the federal government, the states and the towns, and horizontal cooperation among the states and among municipal governments. Cooperative federalism can become experimentalist federalism. And experimentalist federalism, financed by the new tax base, can be the chief instrument for the educational and economic innovations that would bring opportunity to all Americans. An enormous side benefit of this reinvention of federalism would be to change the culture of divided government and political stalemate. Not by a futile attempt to challenge the constitutional arrangements of the United States, but by an effort to tap the underutilized experimentalist potential of the federal system. The fifth element in this progressive alternative is a struggle to take politics out of the shadow of money. Many well-meaning reformers believe that this fifth element must come first. But the truth is that no country in the world cleans up its politics in order later to decide what to do with the cleansed politics. Change of the political rules, and especially of the rules about the relation between money and politics, can happen in reality only in the midst of a contest to change the social and economic direction of the country. In that context, two initiatives would be especially promising. One of them is the public financing of electoral activity on a large scale, which all by itself drastically reduces the impact of private money in politics. And the second initiative is dramatically to expand the access of candidates, political parties, and in the future, even social movements, to the means of mass communication, especially the television and radio. All the media companies should hold their licenses on condition that they make some time available for free for public affairs. The public space for democratic debate in the United States. These five elements are not just a heap of discrete solutions to disconnected problems. They form a project. And this project is marked by a goal and by a method. The goal is to bring a larger life to the ordinary man and woman, to enhance their capabilities, their capacity for agency, a life with broader scope, greater intensity, and more capability. More equality, yes, especially equality of opportunity and of capacity, but not for its own sake, for the sake of a bigness in which many can share. And the method that distinguishes this project is transformation of the institutional background, especially of the institutions that define a market economy. Transformation that is gradual, piecemeal, and fragmentary, but nevertheless, over time, cumulative and far-reaching in its consequence. Traditionally, we think that there are only two things we can do with the market economy: to regulate it or to attenuate the inequalities that it generates through retrospective and compensatory tax and transfer, progressive taxation, and social entitlements. But there's something much more important that we can do with the market economy, and that is to innovate in the arrangements that define it, so that more people can have more access to more markets in more ways, enhancing opportunity and capability. It's not something new although these are unfamiliar words. In the first half of the 19th century, Americans created the most democratized form of agriculture and the most democratized system of finance that had ever existed in the world up to that point. And that was a large part of the building of the United States. When they did that, they were not regulating the market. They were inventing a kind of market that had never existed before. They were democratizing the market economy. And that is what the United States must now do in spades in every department of its national life. The counterparts to democratizing the market are deepening democracy and empowering the individual. A vast life pulses in the United States in the midst of tremendous belittlement and deprivation for millions. The task of the progressives is to confront the injustice by equipping the vitality. It is not to sweeten, it is to empower.